So now is the opportunity for us to sit meditation here and to do one of the most important things that we can do in life, which is make our mind calm. If we know how to make our mind calm, this will give the mind strength. It will give the mind strength enough to see through delusion and to gain what we call right view. So any sort of experiences that you might have while sitting meditation, whether they be good or whether they be bad, just have mindfulness. If you have some sort of good experience, don't get elated with it. Don't get carried away with it. What you need to do is bring your mind back to the meditation object that you're using, be it the breath or investigating the body. Whatever method you use to calm the mind, just bring your mind back to that at that point in time. Because once one has mindfulness within their meditation object, this will give the mind strength and bring a peace to the mind. So for now, we're going to sit for about 20 minutes. At this point in time, I'd just like to ask for the opportunity from Jalkun Mahasamai, who I greatly respect, and all my fellow monks here today, and all of you, my friends in the Dhamma, who have come here who are intent on practicing. Some of you have been here all day now. You've been here since very early this morning, giving the food for the monks and then practicing all day. So by now, those of you that have been here for a long time, your mind should be quite calm and peaceful at the moment. So now's the time for you to really listen to the Dhamma. And what I want to talk about today is not just about the practice of Dhamma, but life with Luang Por Chah as well, and the way he taught about life and practice within life. Before I ordained, I met a monk called Luang Por Bunna, and he was a very, very good monk, and he gave me the advice. If I wanted to go and ordain, I should go and find either two of these monks. I should go see Luang Por Phan or Ajahn Chah. In the end, I decided on Ajahn Chah because very close to my home, he had a branch monastery called Wat Marp Jan, and I already knew the abbot of that monastery. And by that time, Luang Por Phan was becoming quite famous, and he had lots of people coming to visit his monastery all the time. So Ajahn Chah seemed like a good option. Every year while I was a lay person, I had the good fortune to be able to go and pay respects to some very, very good monks in Thailand. Monks like Luang Por Khao, Luang Por Ted, and Luang Por Phan. I would go to Isan and pay my respects to these monks. I would also go up to the north of Thailand and pay respects to monks like Luang Por Wan. And I had the good fortune to go and pay respects to them, but I even had a greater fortune to listen to their teachings. And in essence, they all taught the same thing. They all taught that we should let go of our clinging. Just an example of this, when I went to pay respects to Luang Por Phan once, there was a lay person there, and they wanted Luang Por Phan to bless the sign for their house, for their shop. And so Luang Por Phan asked, this person came back many times and kept asking him, could he bless the sign for their shop? Could he bless the sign for their shop? And every time Luang Por Phan would ask, have you got everything ready yet? Is everything in the shop ready? Are you ready for business? And so when they finally said, yeah, we've got everything ready, he said, okay, just open it then. Just do it. You don't need me to bless the sign. He said, because if you do something like this is taking an outer refuge. This is taking something that's not a true refuge. The thing that you should count on and that you should take as your refuge is the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Because if you take refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, this is what's going to help you get rid of all your deluded views that you have. So we all want right view. We all want to see the world in the correct way. So the start of seeing the world in the correct way is taking refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. When we have taken that refuge and we have great faith in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, there'll be no doubt in the mind. There'll be no shaking off the course. And I followed this teaching, and I did that, and I really took that on the heart. So in time, I actually ended up ordaining at Wat Marp Jan with Ajahn Chah. Already I'd practiced for a while as a layperson, but even though I had ordained, I still had a lot of doubts about the practice and what and which way was the correct way to practice that would take me to the final goal. I was quite lucky though. I had the opportunity to be close to Ajahn Chah and to listen to the way that he taught meditation. You know, a lot of the times he wouldn't teach a lot. He wouldn't go into great detail about teachings. Sometimes he might just say something quite simple like, you know, if you know how to investigate your food properly, you're the one who knows how to meditate. So, because another one of his teachings was, if you get into too much thinking, this can be quite an obstacle for you. He compared it to picking a mango and you using a stick to pick the mango. If you have a stick, it's a stick with a basket, by the way, a stick with a basket. And if you got the stick that's too long, you're not going to be able to pick the mango. But if you've also got a stick that's too short, you're not going to be able to get a mango. So the practice is a lot like this. You compare it to reading too many books. You know, if you read too many books and you think too much and you're too up in the head, then you won't be able to gain any peace of mind. But on the other side, if you're ignorant totally to the teachings, you won't progress either. But in saying that, the great teachers in our tradition, you know, they in essence they didn't really teach much. All they taught us really to do was have mindfulness, to do quite simple things like just when we're walking, just using a simple meditation word like Buddho, Bud with the left foot, right, toe with the right foot. But anyway, to do this, to really have confidence in this, we need faith, and we need the faith to actually know that this will be the path to peace and the path that leads us to the Dhamma. So, in essence, Luang Por Chah was one of these. Ajahn Chah was one of these teachers. The main thing he taught was mindfulness, but he also taught a lot of other things that were very beneficial, like having respect to the elder members in the Sangha. If you can learn to do this and you can learn to humble yourself towards elders, you notice a lot of the different kinds of thoughts that come up in your mind. And if you don't want to pay respects to them, or if you don't want to do any of these things, you notice the different kinds of mental defilements arising right there. So something just as simple as this is a great lesson. Because Ajahn Chah had many, many ways of teaching. There was also another example of, at one time, we were making the Ubosita Hall at Wat Marp Jan. And at that point in time, there was all these great big rocks in the ground, and we had to dig them out, and we needed to smash them up to make like the concrete or whatever. And so I was there, I was helping doing this, and I was just looking at it, and it's like, we've been working for half an hour smashing rocks, and we've only got a handful of rocks. And for me, I looked over this and I'm like, well, this is a waste of time. Why don't we just buy rocks? But Luang Por Chah gave us some food for thought on this. It's like these rocks, they don't come about easy. And at that point in time, I didn't really understand it. But now looking back on this, I understand it a lot more. To actually get just something like a handful of rocks like that, it's like you really have to put a lot of work in. You really, you have to like maybe even blow up a hill. You have to dig the hole. You have to pull the rock out. It takes many people. It takes a lot of manpower. All these different things, and then someone has to go and buy it. Someone has to have the faith to go and buy it, and then go and give it to us monks at Nom Papong. So, but even on the deeper level, this is about the faith of lay people, and every basic lesson is everything in life isn't easy. If you want something, you have to work for it. Like your morality that you're trying hard to keep, it's something that's not easy to do. But once you do keep it, it becomes very beneficial for you. So all these things, everything down to like a handful of rocks, this all comes from the accumulated virtues of the Buddha and the great merit of the Buddha. And the great merit of the Buddha that he taught the Dhamma to the world. And when he taught that Dhamma, there were those that followed it and those that practiced it and those that saw that Dhamma that he taught. Ajahn Chah gave an example of the Dhamma that he would teach people. This is something it wasn't easy for him to come on the Dhamma that he realized, and for him to go out and teach everybody. For him to be in that point where he was teaching, he had to pass through many hardships. He lived in charnel grounds, he lived in very deep forests, had to deal with great fear. He even had to, how would you say, like, pass through the mouth of a tiger. He had to face a tiger. You know, Ajahn Chah really put his life on the line to see the Dhamma that he finally taught all of us. And so Ajahn Chah, he was one that taught from a pure mind, and he got the Dhamma that we're all searching for. So now that we know that's coming from the Dhamma that he's teaching is coming from a pure mind, this is something that we should follow. In the old days of Wat Marp Jan, Ajahn Chah was really quite strict with his monks. He really trained them. He had a lot of time in those days. He'd do things like he'd make the monks sit meditation, move. You know, he'd make you sit from sundown to sun up, and then after that you'd have to go on arms round and go and have the meal. And then even then, after he's finished the meal, he would make you come back and sit in, and he'd start talking, and he might even give a Dhamma discourse, and he might just talk until 3 o'clock, and none of us could go. Like, it would be seen as quite disrespectful if we just wanted to get up and go back to our kutis and have a sleep. Obviously, all of us wanted to get up and run away and go back to our kutis and have a sleep, but we didn't, out of respect for Ajahn Chah. He was doing this so he could train us all. He'd train us all in the ways of Dhamma. And these are the kinds of reasons that, because Ajahn Chah put so much work and so much time into training his monks respected him greatly. Even a little thing like where we would spend the rains retreat. You know, this is something we would never decide for ourselves. We would just leave it up to, it would be up to him where we would spend our rains retreat. We had no choice in the matter. For me personally, I was quite lucky. I had the good fortune to be quite close to him. I was his assistant for a long time, and I'd help him with many different clerical activities in the monastery, different kinds of paperwork, different kinds of running of the monastery, and doing things like recording his talks when he was giving them. So for me, I feel very, very fortunate. I was very lucky to be there a lot of the time when he was teaching the Dhamma. So I had every opportunity to listen to his teachings. So sometimes with Ajahn Chah, he would put on an appearance where he'd just look like he was carefree. He didn't care about anything. He looked like he just doing everything easy or whatever. He wasn't very sort of ferocious or whatever. But in reality, all of us monks, we were all quite scared of him. We were all quite, we knew what his teaching methods were really like. But in saying that, you know, there's many examples where he showed a lot of great kindness to a lot of people. There was a case where there was one novice, like a very young monk, someone who isn't quite a monk yet, just a little kid. But this novice, he was very, very naughty. Like, he'd always be doing things that getting him into trouble, and the monks didn't really like him. But Ajahn Chah was quite worried about him, and Ajahn Chah actually gave him a nickname, like, Monkey Novice. So, but as I said, nobody liked this novice. He was naughty, he was everything, but Ajahn Chah used to really, really praise him and try to find the good in him. One thing that this novice was really, really good at, he could take Ajahn Chah's false teeth and he'd clean them really good, and he'd scrub them and he'd make them clean as you could possibly get them. Because at that time, Ajahn Chah, he would eat betel nut, which makes your mouth all red, and all these different things. So this novice, he'd get in and he'd clean them and they'd be shining. And so basically nobody saw any good in this novice, but Ajahn Chah, he found the good in him, and he saw that. So what he was teaching everyone is, that there is some good in everyone. And so the Ajahn just asked, he was asking about, has anybody seen any Devatas? Any heavenly beings or any things like that? No? Does anybody who believes in them? Yes, we've got a few. Okay. Okay, there's there's many stories about Ajahn Chah with you could say like psychic phenomena, but he was very quiet about these sort of things. He kept a lot of these sort of things to himself. But there were many examples that I saw things for myself, and they're things that I can't doubt. Just for example, once another time when the monks were working on the Uposatha hall at Wat Marp, all day it looked like it was going to rain. The sky was really, really dark, but because what they were doing that day was pouring cement. And so anyway, like the clouds were very dark all day or whatever, and then it basically got to the end of the day, and I was with Ajahn Chah at that point in time, and he said to me, he said, go and check out the cement work and see if they've finished it yet. And so anyway, I went and I looked at it, and yeah, obviously they'd finished. But also, the sky was like really, really black. And so anyway, the next day, some lay people came from in the city in Ubon, and it's not too far away from Wat Marp. And so Ajahn Chah just asked, how is it? Did it, and he sort of slyly asked them, he said, did it rain in the city last night? And they're like, yeah, it poured down, it wouldn't stop all day sort of thing. So, and in that he gave me like a sly little smile sort of thing. And so it's like things like that. He's most likely he's asked the Devatas to stop it raining on the monastery or whatever. But these sort of things, he'd never say it straight. And, and that morning he went in and he sort of gave a talk about it. But, if you didn't know the real story of what happened, you wouldn't have guessed what he was talking about. There was another time where there was this little kid, another story of a naughty kid. This kid, he came with his family, and his family actually asked for Ajahn Chah for some holy water. And whatever, they brung the bottle, and they said, can we have some holy water, Ajahn Chah? And he's like, okay. And he just grabbed it, and he's got, done. And he gave it back to him. And anyway, and they all sort of like, he didn't really do anything. So anyway, they walked outside, and the kid had the bottle, and the kid's like, you didn't do anything to this. This is ridiculous. And he walked outside the monastery gate, and he tipped it out. He went to tip it out. But as he tipped it out, none of the water poured out. So he's trying to tip it out, and like no water was flowing out. He's like, he did do something to this. And so anyway, he's quickly grabbed it and put the lid back on, and they all raced back inside, and they said sorry to Lumpur Cha to Ajahn Chah for not believing him. So, because in essence, what Ajahn Chah was really, really teaching people was to let go of their views, to let go of all the wrong views that they have about the world. As I said, this wasn't a great special, he wasn't teaching anything higher esoterical. He didn't really teach too much. It's just, you have mindfulness and you let go. You let go of all these views and opinions. Like another example of Ajahn Chah doing strange things is there was a monk who wanted to come and stay at Wat Marp, and he was actually quite senior. He'd been a monk for 18 years. But he came, and Ajahn Chah said to him, okay, you sit on the end of the line, and you take your food at the end of the line, and you sit down with the novices. So he did that, Ajahn Chah made him do it for a very, very long time. He made him do it for like over a month. And so this monk, anyway, he's sitting around and sitting in his hut or whatever, and he's like, yeah, I've heard all these stories about Ajahn Chah, and that he's such a great monk, and he's enlightened, and he can read minds or whatever. It's like, I wonder if he can really read minds. And he just kept thinking of this. It's like, can he do it? Can he, sort of in a way, sort of trying to, test him out or whatever. So anyway, the next day he went to pay respects to Lumpur Cha, and Lumpur Cha just sort of looked at him and he's like, can you even see your own mind? What are you doing trying to look at my mind? Can you even notice your own mind yet, that it's going all over the place? And so this guy sort of thought, he was like, oh, wow, he caught me. And this guy, he wasn't afraid of anyone, but the only person he was ever afraid of was Ajahn Chah. There was another example of a layperson came to see Ajahn Chah, and they walked through the monastery to go and find him. And so as soon as that layperson came in and sat down, he said, do you see the tiger that I'm raising at the front? And the layperson was like, what tiger? You didn't see a tiger?
He's like, I'm raising a tiger out the front. He's out there in that hut out the front there. So the layperson was obviously quite confused, and so they decided to go back and say, well, where's this tiger he's talking about? So they went back to the place where Ajahn Chah said that he was raising the tiger, and the hut he said he was raising the tiger. And so this layperson is looking around this monk's hut, and the monks come in and he's going, well, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I just talked to Ajahn Chah, and he said, he's looking after a tiger, and the tiger's in this hut. And this monk was like, because this monk was prone to a lot of anger and a lot of, so he realized it's like, Ajahn Chah knows that I'm sitting in my kuti fuming or whatever. So he did all these quite indirect things to teach monks, but he wouldn't always do things like that. Sometimes he would teach quite straight, but sometimes he would use all these different kinds of techniques to teach people, but not do it in a full on direct way where he's doing things in these special ways. Even at times when Ajahn Chah was quite sick, you could see his mind was still quite sharp and quite agile, and even when he was bedridden, you could, his eyes were still, they're quite fierce and quite sharp. So if you were looking after him and you were doing anything wrong, and if he shot you a glance, even though he was bedridden, you'd just get scared and you'd want to behave yourself. For me, I helped look after him for a lot of years, and I personally didn't really get into any trouble. But that didn't mean that I could just sort of do whatever I wanted, just be whatever. I did really have to be mindful, and I did all the time that I was looking after him. I had to practice, and I had to keep my mind under control. But obviously, there's times where the mind slips, and it goes off the meditation word. But I noticed whenever my mind had slipped, Ajahn Chah would shoot me a fierce look, and I was ooh. So you could see he was teaching me, and he knew what was going on. There was another time where somebody bought Ajahn Chah an orange juice, and I was sitting there as well. And they bought him the juice or whatever, and they put it in front of him, and I just my mind slipped once again, and I went, "Oh, the orange juice, that looks good. It's quite high in vitamin C. I reckon if I had some of that, I'd feel good." And it's probably because I've read a lot of books about vitamins and stuff. But so anyway, and like Luang Por Chah just looked straight at me, and he said, "You see this cup of orange juice? This is the place where you die." And I'm like, and I was just, ooh. So his mindfulness was perfect. Even though he was a lot older and he was quite sick, his mindfulness was perfect. Things like people seeing Devatas or sitting meditation and seeing lights and seeing different images or whatever. This was something that you couldn't talk to him about. It's something he really didn't support. It wasn't like he disbelieved in those things, but he was worried about people getting off the wrong path and sort of going a little bit crazy. And so if somebody comes and say to him, I've sat meditation and I see a light, and he's like, well, why is that so special? You go in the city and there's heaps of lights. So but the thing was, he had great compassion. He didn't want people to, get off the path and get lost. He didn't want people to get sort of caught up in their own thinking. So, and in that, so that's why he taught the direct path. He taught the path of bringing the mind to calmness and letting go of all mental emotions. There's a lot of stories about Ajahn Chah that have gone around over the years. But some have come from his very, very close disciples and people that have seen things with their own eyes, and those disciples have told me these sort of things. So it's like hearing it from first-hand experience. There's a monk called Luang Por Owen, and he's not a direct disciple of Ajahn Chah, but he's a little bit junior to Ajahn Chah, but he spent a lot of time with Ajahn Chah. And he relays the story of one year before Ajahn Chah went to the place that would later become Wat Marp Jan. He was staying they were both staying together for the rains retreat at a very secluded place. And Ajahn Chah was doing a lot of practice in those days. He wouldn't come down to eat. He'd only come down to eat once every 15 days. Other than that, he'd stay up on the hill by himself and not come down at all. So anyway, on one of the days that Ajahn Chah came down, because Ajahn Chah is more senior than Lumpur Owen, Ajahn Chah would walk in front of Lumpur Owen. And so anyway, that day they were walking and there was like mud or whatever. And Lumpur Owen like swears he saw this with his own eyes. Lumpur Chah would walk, but his feet didn't touch the ground. He hovered over the ground sort of thing. And he was obviously looking and he's like, yeah, his feet aren't touching the ground. So, and this is something he saw with his own eyes, and he's a monk, and so he can't lie. So, Lumpur Owen is actually he's actually a disciple of a monk called Lumpur Ginnery, who was a disciple of Lumpur Mun, who's considered the father of the forest tradition. He also stayed a while with another monk called Lumpur Tongrat, who was another teacher of Ajahn Chah's as well. And so, all these great masters, they used examples to teach people to get rid of their views and opinions. So one day, Lumpur Tongrat was walking with some of his disciples, and they're walking along a road or whatever, and they saw a cow, and he's like, oh, can you see the cow? And they're like, yeah. He's like, yeah, it's a nice female cow, isn't it? And so they looked at it, and they're like, no, that's a male cow. And he's like, no, it's a female cow. And so they're like, no, I'm looking at it, I'm sure it's a male cow, like I'm positive. And so they were arguing with him, and they're arguing back and forth, and Ajahn Ginnery just said, is there any such thing as like a male and a female? And straight away the monk realized, he's like, oh, he's teaching me about like conventional reality. So he humbled himself after that. Another sort of story is, when in the time that Ajahn Chah actually started Wat Marp Pong, in those days in northeast Thailand, it's one of those things like everybody just smokes cigarettes. So when they first started Wat Marp Pong, all the monks there, they all smoked cigarettes or whatever. And anyway, it wasn't till later when the Western monks came in and they said, oh no, smoking's a bad thing, it doesn't look very good. And after that, Ajahn Chah said, okay, we'll change, and none of us can smoke cigarettes. But obviously, some of the monks have been doing it their whole lives or whatever. So obviously they try and go off and sneak smokes every now and again. So there was a time where it was like, the smoking group or whatever. They go down to the dyeing shed, and around the dyeing shed there's all leaves, there's all like dead leaves or whatever. And so they go down. They knew, because if anyone was coming, they'd hear it, and so they'd be like, "Oh, have a quiet smoke," but everyone be quiet, because if Ajahn Chah comes, he's going to bust us or whatever, like a bunch of little high school kids. So anyway, they had this smoking group or whatever, and so one day they're having a smoke, and they're like, "Yeah, be quiet, don't say anything," but they're just sitting around talking, sort of thing, and anyway, so they started to talk or whatever. Then all of a sudden, one of them turned around, and Ajahn Chah was standing right behind him. Yeah, nobody heard him come at all, sort of thing. And that guy, he was scared out of his pants, and he was shivering, sort of thing. But the good thing about that was, after that day, that monk quit smoking. So yeah. So an example that I saw of Ajahn Chah doing these kind of things. When I was a younger monk, in those days, at the front of Wat Marp Pong, there was a charnel ground, where they used to go and throw the bodies away in the forest. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go and try, and go meditate in there. And ever since I was a little kid, I've been scared of ghosts and death and all those, as most kids are. So I was sitting there that night, and I'm like, I hope no ghosts come. I hope, I'm really sort of praying. It's like, don't let any ghosts come tonight, because I don't think I could handle it. And it's like, please, Lumpur Chah, help me, tonight. If any ghosts are going to come tomorrow or whatever. But anyway, so I'm there going, oh, Lumpur Chah, help me. And then all of a sudden, I see this light. I see a light coming, and I heard a voice. It's like, who's over there? And it's like, and I said, oh, it's me, Pra Anan. It's like, oh, okay. And it was Ajahn Chah. He'd sort of come to check on him. So, he must have been, usually he didn't go out walking in the monastery at that time of the night. So it was usually a lot earlier he came out. Most of the time he'd already gone to bed, and he usually didn't walk out that far. So, Ajahn Chah knew. So either way, what we need to take this as a lesson of is, like, if we have a good teacher, when we find someone that's a really good teacher, we should respect that teacher with the utmost. So all of these great teachers that have trained in in the tradition that we have here in the Thai forest tradition, they train to the utmost. They put their life on the lines for the Dhamma, and they train with the great masters like Luang Por Man. And they followed the path, and they saw the results of the path. And so from them following that path, they know the correct path to walk. They know the pitfalls. They know the dangers. So now they come out and they teach this path. So this is, all of us should take this as a good example, and we should be following what they teach because they've seen the results for themselves, and they know what the path is, and they know how one should develop a calm mind. They know how one should keep good morality. They've done these things and they've got the results for themselves, and they've seen the Dhamma in their own hearts. And out of their great kindness, they want you to follow this path as well, because they know how beneficial it is. This is quite important to have a good teacher there, because all good teachers, all they want their disciples to do is to see the Dhamma, is to see the truth that the Buddha was teaching. So now we're quite lucky in the world at the moment. We have these teachers, and these teachers, some of these teachers have only just recently passed away. We've had the great teachers like Luang Por Man. We've had Long Dhamma Haboa, Ajahn Ginari, Ajahn Tongrat, Ajahn Gongma, Luang Por Fan, Luang Por Wan, all these great teachers, all the way down to Ajahn Chah. So we have all these great teachers that have seen the path, and the path that they walked on, and the path that they've practiced after. That's the sure path, because they've seen the results for themselves. You can see nowadays there's all these different kinds of meditation techniques, and this person saying they know the way to enlightenment, and that person saying they know the way of the Dhamma or whatever. But a lot of the times it isn't sure. But if you take these teachers, these are monks that have really trained themselves to the fullest and seen the full Dhamma. And so they teach this path to you, and they want you to stay with this path. And if you do stay with this path, one day for sure you will see the Dhamma that they saw as well. So I wish you all the very best in developing this path that they've laid down. There's 15 minutes left if anyone's got quick questions. So the question was, just for anyone that didn't hear it, how do we know a good monk when we see one? How do we know that they're practicing well, and how do we know that we should have faith in that monk? And if we do, how should we, if we do see one of these monks and we just meet them on the street, we don't know anything about them, should we find out about their background before we pay respects to them? Or, what should we do if somebody invites us to go and listen to their teachings or something? Should we go? Should we, should we follow these teachings? But in essence, how do we know a good monk when we see one? Really, with a situation like this, the main thing you need to have is wisdom. You need, for example, it's like when you go and buy something. It's like you don't just go and buy the first thing. You don't grab the first thing on the shelf. You look at the product. You check it out, and you do all those different kinds of things. So you're investigating what's a good product to buy. You have to use that same kind of wisdom if you want to try and find a good monk. At the very basic level of a good monk is someone that should keep to the vinaya very well, keep to the discipline, keep their morality in very good order. This is like an outer gauge where you can really gauge how good a monk is. And you have to look at this. How good is their vinaya? And you have to notice this over a long period of time. Do they keep it well? Or are they just putting on a show? But you might not know it like a deeper inner level of what that monk's mind is really like. So a lot of times you can't just take face value as well. You can't just take what the sort of act somebody puts on the outside. So you have to in that case, you do have to ask friends, and you have to look at that monk as he got like long-standing disciples? Does he teach well? You have to really look over all these sort of things. Like for the Ajahn personally, he'd heard lots of good things about Ajahn Chah before he ordained as a monk. He heard all these great stories. And then he had really good friends in the Dhamma, like Luang Por Bunna, who was a very good monk, and Luang Por Bunna recommended him, and so many people recommended Ajahn Chah. So in that, the Ajahn had faith in Lumpur Bunda, and like he had faith in all these other people's opinions as well. So that's why he went. And then after that, he went and met Ajahn Chah and saw what Ajahn Chah was about. So this is something that's quite important as well. You need good friends in the Dhamma, and you need people that can give you good advice and right advice, and people that have the right information. And you need to ask them. You need to go see these monks or whatever, and ask these people, ask these good friends of yours. So in a way, it's like we need a map sort of thing to find someone like this. But on this map, for you people in Sydney, you guys are quite lucky. You have someone that, like Jalkun Mahasamai here. He's a very good monk. He's been a monk for a very, very long time, and he's very respected by all the monks in our sangha. You know, this is someone you should really go and see, and you should really go and ask him about different monks, because, you know, he's been around a long time and he knows, and, you know, he has a very tempered opinion, and he's someone who has a lot of loving kindness. For the Ajahn himself, he says the Ajahn himself respects Jalkun Mahasamai a lot. He's someone that's shown the Ajahn a lot of kindness, and even the very first time Ajahn Anan came to Australia, which was like 13 years ago, Jalkun Mahasamai didn't even know Ajahn, and Ajahn didn't know him, but Jalkun showed him so much kindness, and he let him stay there, and he helped organise all these different things, and he was really just a humble and kind monk. So the Ajahn respects him a lot. So you guys are quite lucky here. You can go and ask Jalkun, and, you know, also in aspects of the Dhamma and aspects about your practice, he's been practicing for a long time, so you can go and ask him. You already have a good friend here. You know, but in saying all that is you know, whatever monk you see, and, like, you know, you might have faith in different kinds of monks or whatever, but whatever monk you have faith in, you know, then you should try and help out, and you should try and listen to him and follow what he's teachings. And then, you know, even, you know, in the end, if he isn't like a great monk, it's like, you know, you've given from a heart of goodness, and you've put your heart into it fully. So, and, you know, if you're doing that, then maybe one day, even if he isn't good now, maybe he will be good in the future. There was a time the Ajahn went and saw Lumpur Lui, and somebody actually asked him about this, and Lumpur Lui said, well, you know, if you can't meet a good monk, that doesn't matter. It's just, if you find a monk, go and pay, you know, go and try and help him out, because if you're doing that, you're thinking of the goodness of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. You're thinking about making merit with good monks. So this here already is very important as well. If anyone didn't hear that, if we were to find out somehow that a monk wasn't so good, should we let others know that monk isn't good, or should we just keep our mouth shut?
Sometimes we think that person is not good, just one person opinions. You know, maybe he's good, we don't know.
Okay, I might translate now. Lots of conversations going on there. I'll do my best. Okay. So you all heard the question. So, but what you really have to look at, and the way you in a way you make your decisions, you have to look at that monk, the way they practice, and what they take on as their foundation, and what they take on as their standpoint of being a monk. You know, a monk even came and asked Ajahn Chah this once. It's like, you know, can I take you as my example? And Ajahn Chah just looked at him and said, no. You take the Buddha as your example, because the Buddha was perfect in every way. He laid out the Dhamma, he laid out the Vinaya, and in all aspects it was perfect in every way. So the Buddha was the highest. The Buddha was the highest example that we can take. But then as the Buddha is the highest, and then coming down from that, you have the noble Sangha. And in our day and age, as I said before, we're quite lucky to have really good monks like Longta Mahabua and Ajahn Chah. And they're trying to keep this perfect mode of practice that the Buddha put down. They're trying to keep that alive and keep that in practice. So these two monks, like Ajahn Chah and Lungta Mahabua, they were how do you say, like a little bit before us or whatever, and so they now have disciples that have gone out into the world and they're teaching or whatever. And so what you have to look at is, are those monks, the newer monks or whatever, are they following what great monks like Ajahn Chah said and great monks like Lungta Mahabua said? Because those monks were following the Buddha, who was following perfection, who was the epitome of perfection. You have to see, and for example, in our Wat Marp Jan Sangha, it's like, well, is a monk doing something outside what Ajahn Chah taught? Is he doing something outside the way of practice that Ajahn Chah was teaching? If he is, you have to take that into consideration, but you also have to have wisdom as well and go, well, maybe, it might be outside what he's teaching, but, maybe what he's doing in his specific situation, it isn't entirely wrong. It might be, he might consider it right or whatever, but what you have to realize is, we are sort of stuck in the conventional world, and we need to, we have different groups or whatever. It does, to keep different traditions alive. So, but it doesn't mean that they can't get along. So, for example, you have Mahayana and you have Theravada. These two, in many ways, these are quite different, but you can look at it as just like, it's being the two wings of the one bird. That bird needs both wings to fly, so they need both those aspects, like Mahayana and Theravada, to fly, and that means to like spread the Buddha's teachings. So what you really need to ask yourself, if you think a particular monk is no good, it's like you really need to ask yourself, okay, if you're going to say something about this, are you doing anything against your own morality? And then someone jumped in and said, yeah, it's wrong. And the Ajahn said, well, why? It's like, because it's paying out someone, and it might just be that person's own opinions. Where I got lost. But the Ajahn once again just said, you have to see, are they following like the correct mode of practice? Are they doing all these right things? And we have to know for ourselves. We have to take the examples that we see in our own lives of that monk. What they're doing is. We have to know for ourselves if they're good or they're not good. And all of us, we all have different kinds of faith. And maybe one of us has faith in one monk, but another one has faith in another monk. Some people like different things, different qualities of a monk. Maybe somebody likes a monk who's very, very little and, maybe speaks very little or whatever, but others might like another monk who's, is a bit more outgoing, shows a lot of kindness or whatever. So different people have different kinds of opinions with these things. For example, it's like none of you here eat the same food. None of you here drive the same car. Everybody has different tastes. Everybody has different opinions. So whatever monk you like, you should follow them. It's fine. But where it becomes wrong is when you start taking your monk as the only right monk, and everybody else's monk's a bad monk. So that's the main thing. Even though you may have different opinions about these sort of things, it's like just don't argue over them. And don't attach to your view as the right view. So in essence, whichever one you have faith in, that's the one you should follow, and whichever one you feel has done the right thing, they're the ones you should follow. Sometimes you might notice in the course of time with a monk, maybe they start out really good. They start out, they're very, very content with little, and they're very, very what we call very strict or whatever. But then over time, they gradually change, and they let these different things go. And so but this is normal. This is normal for things to change, and normal for people to change. And it's, basically it's normal for opinions to change as well. But the thing that you really can notice is if a monk changes too much off the path of like the great teachers and the path of the Buddha, this means this monk doesn't have a good, strong foundation, and that's not a monk you should follow. So once again, he emphasizes the main thing is just don't argue about it. That's the wrong thing to do. It's like, you have to take the example. There's like the Zen example of the flag in the wind. There was two monks. They were looking at a flag up on the flag post, and it was waving in the wind. And one monk said it's waving because there's a flag there, and the other one's going, no, it's waving because there's wind there. And they were arguing about it. And then the teacher walked over, and he's gone, there's no flag, there's no wind. Over. So, these things are they're just conventional reality. In essence, all these things are empty. So just let them go.